Welcome to the Creativity, Thinking, and Education Podcast with your host, Patricia Rose Upsack. Today we will be talking to the remarkable Michael J. Gelb. This podcast is part of one of the two-part series called the Master Da Vinci class, and we are thrilled to be able to bring it to you.
Michael is the world's leading authority on the application of genius thinking to personal and organizational development and the best-selling author of 14 books, including Creativity on Demand, How to Ignite and Sustain the Fire of Genius, and How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. A sought-after speaker and consultant, Michael works globally with Fortune 500 companies, small businesses, and nonprofits. He is also a gifted teacher of the Alexander Technique, Aikido, Tai Chi, and qigong, and a professional juggler who has performed with the Rolling Stones. Welcome, Michael, and I have to ask you right off the bat, because I'm sure everybody else is going to want to know about it. Please tell us about being a professional juggler with the Rolling Stones.
With pleasure. Well, I learned how to juggle many years ago, and the person I learned from was not a very good teacher. Because what he told me was he was a great juggler, and I was so fascinated. I thought it was moving sculpture. And at the time, I was looking for a means of artistic expression, and juggling seemed to be the right method for me. But the teacher just said to me, take these 3 balls, throw them up, don't let any of them drop. So of course, I failed over and over again.
Of course.
But then I had an epiphany where I realized that there must be a better way. Uh-huh. And I developed a method for teaching people how to juggle, starting with myself, that focused on being in a state of relaxed concentration and focusing on throwing the balls rather than worrying about catching it. And I found that when I took the fear of dropping and the fear of failure out of the process, it made everything much easier. People relaxed, I relaxed, the ball started landing in my hands, and I became very skilled as a juggler. And I was in graduate school at the time. I was training to be a teacher of the Alexander Technique in London, and I was also writing my master's thesis.
And I love the Alexander Technique. It's
amazing. Great. Well, my master's thesis became my first book, which is Body Learning, An Introduction to the Alexander Technique, and it's been in print now for 34 years.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm going to have to look that up. That sounds like something I would love to read.
I humbly recommend it.
Anyway,
I was actually using juggling because the Alexander Technique is supposed to be a means for finding appropriate effort in activity, manifesting grace and ease and poise. So really what I was doing was applying the Alexander Technique to the art of juggling, and it worked. I got really good. I was juggling 4 balls, 5 balls, flaming clubs, and
oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, and then I was earning money as a juggler to support myself while I continued my training as an Alexander Technique teacher, and I formed a juggling act, and my partner, who used to be the science editor for the Reuters news service in Europe, a great guy named Tim Timberlake, and Tim and I were practicing one day in Hyde Park in London, and a fellow approached us and said, I'm the tour manager for the Rolling Stones, and we need jugglers because we have a carnival theme. How would you guys like to juggle on stage with Mick Jagger and the Stones tonight at Earl's Court Theater? So there we were, juggling at Earl's Court, and that worked out well enough that they invited us to the Nebworth Rock Festival, where we juggled on a stage shaped like Mick Jagger's mouth, no kidding, to an audience of over 100,000 people.
Oh my goodness!
So yeah, it was a lot of fun, and then we also juggled at a series of Bob Dylan concerts as well.
Oh.
And I'm probably the world's highest paid juggler because I figured out that this was a fabulous way to teach people about the process of accelerating their learning. And I devised a seminar using juggling as a metaphor for learning, which I've taught now to corporations around the world. I did a seminar for over 1,000 IBM engineers where I taught them all how to juggle. I've done it for all kinds of companies all over the world. So, I've had a ton of fun with and I still teach it in my seminars, and I still do. I actually have I wrote a book called Lessons from the Art of Juggling, which came out in the early 90s, and I was on Good Morning America. I taught Joan London how to juggle on live television. It was really fun. And the latest edition of that book is called The 5 Keys to High Performance, and it's an ebook on my website. So people want to learn how to juggle.
What is your website? We'll probably mention it a couple of times through the interview.
Oh, sure, yeah. It's Michael Gelb, Gelb, michaelgelb.com. And if people go to the site and they go to the links page, they can see there's a couple of links for some videos, and one is a 5-minute video where I teach everybody how to juggle, so you can learn to juggle for free on my website.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, that's. I love that story about the juggling. Thank you very much.
Sure,
so,
my pleasure.
Also, one of the things that we wanted to talk about is the way I knew you, and the way that. I've read some other books. Like there was one book that was about the brain that I thought was just fascinating that you wrote with another person.
Yes.
What was the title of that?
It's called Brain Power.
Right. Improve
your mind as you age.
Right. That was wonderful.
Thank you. Well, I wrote that to celebrate my 60th birthday.
Oh, well, happy birthday.
Thank you. Well, it was a couple of years ago.
Right.
But the idea was, what are the research-validated, practical, simple things that we can all do to improve as we age?
Right. Well, it was. I loved it. I mean, it really was. It was a wonderful book. But we aren't really going to talk about that much today because two of your books that really are just tied right into the theme of our telesummit is How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci and Creativity on Demand. So first, could you talk to us a little bit about How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci? I've used it for years. I think I told you before we started that I used it with students. And I also sometimes, I love that it's frontwards and backwards. And, I don't know what it says about my brain, but I love the way that book is put together.
Thank you. Well, when I was a child, Leonardo da Vinci was one of my heroes.
Oh, he's one of mine too. I love him.
Yeah, along with Superman.
I don't know if Superman's one of my heroes, but Leonardo da Vinci.
Well, I remember when I discovered that Superman was just a comic book character, but Leonardo was real. And, my grandmother was an artist. She was Italian.
Oh.
And she told me about Leonardo da Vinci, and it just seemed amazing that there was someone with so many talents and abilities.
Oh, right.
And the more I learned about him, the more talented and extraordinary he seemed to be.
Right.
And I realized that he was really somebody who represented human possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I studied psychology. I studied philosophy. In college, I became a teacher of the Alexander technique. But what I was really interested in was the fulfillment of human potential, and specifically teaching people how to be more creative in their professional and personal lives.
Right.
So not so much artistic creativity, but applying the principles of artistic creativity to living a more fulfilling life and being more effective in your work.
Uh-huh.
And I began leading seminars in the late 70s on that topic. I got engaged by a number of companies around the world, and I would refer to Leonardo da Vinci as an example.
Mm-hmm.
But then as the years went by, I was referring more and more to Leonardo. It was just a natural thing to do. And I had an opportunity. I was being considered to speak at a conference in Florence, Italy, which is my favorite city.
Oh, I love Florence.
And I wanted to be sure to get invited. I needed to come up with an absolutely compelling topic.
Right.
So when the education chairperson asked me, I'll never forget, he said, if we were to invite you, what would you do? And he said, we want something really special because everybody wants to go to Florence.
Yeah, of course.
And I looked him right in the eye and I said, how about how to think like Leonardo da Vinci? He said, can you really do that? And I said, sure.
Oh, how did the presentation go well?
Well, it's a really tough group. They're all company presidents, and the culture of their organization is if they don't like you, they just get up and walk out.
Oh, no.
And yeah, they're really tough. But, they pay lots of money to come to these events, and they don't want to waste their time, and they score you on a scale of 1 to 10, and if you get below an 8, you're never heard from again. If you get above a 9, which is very hard to do, you get invited to all these great events around the world. But, the good news is that even though it's a lot of pressure, this is a topic that I had thought about a lot over the years, and this provided me a great reason to absolutely immerse myself in it.
Uh-huh.
So I literally went to Leonardo's birthplace and the place he died. I walked his footsteps. I read all his notebooks. I started dreaming about him.
Oh,
and from those dreams, the principles for thinking like Leonardo emerged. And I wrote a paper about it that summer. And it's kind of funny because I sent in my biography to the committee to introduce me, but they confused the paper about Leonardo with my bio. So when the person introduced me, the introduction went like this. Ladies and gentlemen, members and guests, here at the Young Presidents Organization, we've had many extraordinary resources, but never have I had the privilege and pleasure of introducing someone with a resume like this. Anatomist, architect, botanist, city planner, designer, engineer, painter, sculptor. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Gelb. It was great. But, the good news is nobody walked out. I got a very high score.
Good.
And I was recently in Rome doing a program on Leonardo da Vinci for that same group. So
really,
I've done as a result of that programs all over the world for that group, and many others, of course, because it struck a chord. And then I realized I need to turn this into a book, and I absolutely immersed myself in trying to translate Leonardo's wisdom into contemporary terms, and.
Oh, I think you've done a wonderful job. It's
and
I love the workbook that comes with it that came afterwards.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's nice when your book's successful, you get to do a workbook.
Right.
But the workbook was people find the workbook very helpful because they don't want to write in the book, but they want to do all the exercises. So we set it up that way. And the other thing that not everybody notices about the workbook is that it has two separate covers. The front cover
yes, it does.
says that How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci workbook, and it takes you through the exercises and guides you to actually write out your answers. And you flip it over, and it's the How to Think Like Leonardo notebook. And it guides you to keep a notebook like Leonardo da Vinci.
Right.
And
I love it.
Yeah, well, on one cover you have a big picture of Leonardo with a small picture of Mona Lisa. And when you flip it over, you have a big picture of Mona Lisa with a small picture of Leonardo.
Right.
And when you go to the middle, where the borderline between the workbook and the notebook, where you flip it over, you see the computer graphic comparison of the Mona Lisa and the Da Vinci portrait, showing that they are identical in every proportion.
Right.
which is just a really fun thing for, you can show people the front cover, show them the back cover, show them the middle, and amaze all your friends.
See, and that's you using your creativity. Look at that.
It was fun. It was fun to put that together. But it was, what the exciting thing for me, where it really comes to life. I mean, you were mentioning that it was helpful to you when you were a teacher working with your students, and that
right.
I had somebody call into a radio show I was on. It was a parent, and he said, "This book gave me everything I always wanted to teach my children, but didn't have the words to say."
Oh, that's wonderful.
Isn't that wonderful? And
it is wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I got a mind map sent to me from a teacher in Poland, made by all her students on the 7 Da Vinci principles.
Oh,
and it was sort of a collage mind map showing how they used the
idea.
7 principles as the core of their curriculum for their year's study.
Uh-huh.
At the Da Vinci Science Center in Allentown, Pennsylvania, when you walk into the museum, you see banners with the 7 principles hanging from the ceiling, and then there's a plaque that says that the museum is dedicated to sharing the 7 principles for thinking like Leonardo as articulated in How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. So,
could you tell our audience what the 7 principles are?
With pleasure. The first principle, we'll do them in Italian and then translate to English.
Okay.
The first principle, curiosità. Curiosità. Of course, it means curiosity.
Right.
Leonardo da Vinci was probably the most curious person who ever lived. And this is our birthright of genius. We're all born curious, and a lot of times we get it knocked out of us by school and life.
No, that's true. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So we aim to give people a lot of guidance as to how to, and encouragement to have a renaissance of their original passion for learning. The second principle, dimostrazione. Dimostrazione. It sounds like the English word demonstration, and it's the word Leonardo used in his notebooks where he's counseling his students to demonstrate things through their own experience and their own independent thinking. So Leonardo says, it's good to learn from others, it's good to study, but think for yourself. Think for yourself.
Right.
And, of course, at Leonardo's time, there was a shortage of information, and now there's too much. But the challenge still exists. And, again, Leonardo gives very practical guidance on how you can cultivate that independence of mind. So I translate that into practical exercises that my readers can do. The third principle for thinking like Leonardo, sensazione, which translates, of course, as sensation, and it refers to the idea of sharpening all your senses. So Leonardo said that the senses are the ministers of the soul. And he cultivated his own sensory awareness. Today, the popular term for this is mindfulness.
Oh, right.
Mindfulness just means paying attention to what you're experiencing in the moment, being
Right.
fully present in the moment. And Leonardo counseled this 500 years ago. And it's a secret. One of the great things people, besides just obviously enriching the quality of your life, it's also one of the simple and most delightful secrets of nurturing your soul and encouraging your own creative development. And it's simply to appreciate beauty in your life every day, to go out of your way to enjoy beautiful music, beautiful art, nature, fine food, wine, just to bring your full attention and appreciation to savor the simple, beautiful joys of everyday life will not only make you a much happier person, but you'll also start noticing that you're more inspired and more creative.
Right. Things just start to flow. That's wonderful. Right.
It's and it's just I'll give you I was teaching a seminar for a mixed group of business people and public government employees, and we had some folks from the VA hospital, and one of them was a nurse who was in charge of the ward for veterans suffering from PTSD. So you have, I put them in groups, and I gave them the question. I said, how can you bring more beauty to your life every day, personally and professionally? So what can you do for yourself? And what could you do in your workplace to make the environment more beautiful? So this woman, and then we debriefed. They had the conversation. We debriefed, and this woman raised her hand. She says, well, I work in this ward, and I have people suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and they come in, and there's CNN playing on the TV while they're waiting for their appointment. So here we have people who, have survived terrible trauma, and what's on in the background is
trauma,
terrorist bombings, and disasters and scandals and constant parade of misery. She said, I'm removing the CNN. I'm actually going to take the television out of the waiting room, and I'm going to play Mozart music. And I'm going to, and I'm going to put fresh flowers in the waiting room, and I'm going to create an environment that is beautiful and inspiring to begin healing these veterans the moment they walk into our ward. And to me, that's what makes my life meaningful, is somebody who gets this principle and applies it in a practical way to enrich people's quality of life. So that's sensazione. The fourth principle, sfumato. It's a word that art critics actually coined to refer to the hazy, mysterious quality that you see in Leonardo's paintings. And what it represents is a really important characteristic of the most creative people, which is their ability to embrace the unknown, to be more comfortable with uncertainty. Because if you want to be creative, you have to be willing to explore things that you don't know and understand. That's the essence of creativity. If you want certainty, you're not going to be creative.
The unknown.
Yeah, exactly. But people are terrified of the unknown, so we guide them to be more comfortable and recognize that it's actually a good sign. I call it developing your confusion endurance.
Oh, that's nice.
And it's symbolized most beautifully by the Mona Lisa smile, which is the classic expression of mystery, which is part of why it's such a famous painting, because it's so fascinating and always will be. The next principle, arte scienza. Arte means art, scienza means science. Arte scienza represents the idea of finding the balance between your logical, analytical, rational mind and your more intuitive, imaginative, receptive mind. Most people are stuck predominantly in one or another mode. They analyze everything, or they're drifting off into imagination, and they don't critique their ideas thoroughly enough. And creativity requires both. One of the myths about being creative is that if you're just imaginative and playful and intuitive, you're creative. Well, that's just not true, because you'll never get anything done. You'll never manifest your creativity. But if you're only analytical and critical, you'll never think of anything new.
Right.
That's
true.
So, right.
You have to use both sides.
You have to use them both. And again, Leonardo offers specific practical guidance on how we can do that. So I aim to translate that into exercises and practices and reflections that people can do to generate more ideas in less time and then come up with strategies for actually manifesting their ideas. Then the next principle, corporalita. Corporalita. So corporalita means balance the body and the mind. And one of the things that many people don't know about Leonardo, they know he was, of course, one of the greatest artists who ever lived. And many people are familiar with the fact that he also was way ahead of his time in his scientific exploration. Right. But they're not aware that he was renowned as a great athlete, as a remarkable physical specimen. He was graceful and had an amazing physique, and people used to turn out just to watch him walk down the street because he was such an amazingly beautiful human being.
Huh. That's amazing.
And when you study his notebooks, you see that he gives advice to his students on cultivating their physical energy, on being more balanced, more poised. He even gives advice on diet, and it's all common sense. It's a lot of Leonardo's advice on diet and exercise turns out that's what's in the research validated material in Brain Power to improve yourself as you age.
Oh, that's interesting.
So yeah, Leonardo, 500 years ago, Leonardo wrote, "Iron rusts from disuse. Water that does not flow becomes stagnant. Thus it is with the human mind." He gives advice on he says, enjoy a healthy diet of the freshest, most wholesome food you can find. Well, that remains as valid today as it was then.
Absolutely.
So, and then the seventh principle that brings it all together, the seventh principle is connessione. Connessione. Everything connects to everything else. So Leonardo was a higher order thinker, and he counseled others to look for relationships and connections, see the big picture and the details. So like many other great minds, he was what today we would call an environmentalist, which is really an insufficient word, because the idea that you're separate from the environment is absurd.
Right.
The idea of we're not saving the earth, we're saving ourselves.
Right, exactly. No.
And Leonardo saw the earth as a living organism.
Yes.
And saw all life as interconnected, as do many great minds. They part of enlightenment, what people call enlightenment, is just seeing that we're all woven together in the same fabric, and we have to take this more holistic view of our life here on earth. Anyway, so that's a connessione is the seventh principle, and the seven principles form. There's a logic to them. If you're curious, you're asking questions, you're exploring. You think for yourself. You sharpen your senses. You open yourself to exploring the unknown. You use logic and imagination to make sense of the unknown. You need physical energy to have the stamina to continue to explore through the unknown. And then you make new connections. You see things that you didn't see before, and that leads to more curiosity and more independent thinking. So it's the seven principles form a continuous guidance for exploring whatever it is you want to explore. I mean, I apply this a lot with businesses to help solve some of their most important problems, but we also obviously apply it with teachers so that they can be more effective in helping kids develop their potential and their ability.
Right.
And
thank you for joining me here at the Creativity, Thinking, and Education podcast. As I said before, this podcast is part one of a two-part series called the Master Da Vinci Class with Michael J. Gelb. Please visit our website at happyteachershappystudents.com. And if you find value in this podcast and the message that we are trying to spread, then click the subscribe button and give my show a review. I am so excited to be able to share the timeless awareness of the wonderful guests that we have lined up and that we will have in the future. Share the timeless awareness of all of the guests that we have now and hopefully in many months to come. Thank you.